It seems to be something widely assumed, but not necessarily widely contemplated. Now, the two main points that we have to think about in this issue are there certain choices that people make without being absolutely preconditioned to make them? And how does this line up with our moral responsibility? Now, everyone feels that they have a certain amount of say-so in what they decide to do, and everyone feels that people who do criminal acts or send gifts or do anything should be held morally responsible for the good and bad things that they do. Now, I'm not a philosopher, but I have some interest in the issue, and so many occurrences of it in popular media have made me want to study it and read about it more. One famous example is the appropriately titled 1980 song Free Will by the Canadian rock band Rush. It starts with these lyrics. There are those who think that life has nothing left to chance, a host of holy horrors to direct our aimless dance, a planet of playthings we dance on the strings of powers we cannot perceive. The stars aren't aligned or the gods are malign. Blame is better to give than receive. So basically there are a few things that the song is pointing out. It's asking, can humans be responsible even if they could not have done otherwise? Is justice still applicable if everything is preset? Is the universe just inevitabilities? Now, these are some interesting questions that are easier to attempt an answer for if we define some key terms. There are three main definitions of free will. There's libertarianism, not to be confused with the political party. There's hard determinism. And then there's compatibilism, or soft determinism. Now, let's start with libertarianism. This is a pretty common sense view which says that you have the ability to do otherwise than what you actually do. In other words, you have the power of contrary choice. So when you wake up in the morning and you're thinking, I want to have Pop-Tarts, I want to have Cocoa Puffs, the future could really go either way. It's open to you. Those are both genuine possibilities. However, libertarianism has been accused of being anti-scientific because so many scientific minds are set on determinism. And it's also been accused of being incoherent because if our choices aren't purely originating from our dispositions, then where do they come from? Where do our choices form? Now, on the other end of the spectrum is determinism, which is basically the idea that free will is an illusion and everything is set in stone, so to speak. It describes a universe where everything that happens is the only thing that could possibly happen given the conditions. Now, in the 2010 best-selling book, The Grand Design, Stephen Hawking and Leonard Malone now write, though we feel that we can choose what we do, our understanding of the molecular basis of biology shows that biological processes are governed by the laws of physics and chemistry, and therefore are as determined as the orbits of the planets. Recent experiments in neuroscience support the view that it is our physical brain, following the known laws of science, that determines our actions and not some agency that exists outside those laws. For example, a study of patients undergoing awake brain surgery found that by electrically stimulating the appropriate regions of the brain, one could create in the patient the desire to move the hand, arm, or foot, or to move the lips and talk. It is hard to imagine how free will can operate if our behavior is determined by physical law, so it seems that we are no more than biological machines, and that free will is just an illusion. That's a perfect example of determinism. Now, between these two extremes are compatibilism, or soft determinism. This is basically the idea that free will and determinism are obviously compatible. That's why it's called compatibilism. But the compatibilistic view of free will is different from the libertarian view of free will. They define it differently, and it seems kind of nuanced. So compatibilistic free will is the ability to act according to your motivation. You always do the thing that you most want to do. However, you weren't able to do otherwise. I know that seems sort of not like that big of a difference. So you can imagine, for example, a ball on a slope, an inclined plane. The ball is your will, and the slope is your dispositions. The ball just rolls right down. It always does the thing that it's most inclined to do. So a good example is this is the quote from Arthur Schopenhauer, who famously said in his book, published in 1839, On the Freedom of the Will, man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. Now, the difficulty with these different perspectives is to figure out which one most successfully meshes with our sense of justice and science. So are our justice systems compatible with predetermination? Now, think about it in deterministic terms for a second, determinism being that everything is set in stone. If a murderer murders, is he held accountable for murder if he could not have not murdered? Even if he wanted to murder, if he could not have avoided murdering, if he was inevitably preset on choosing murder, is he still responsible? There's a quote from John Polkinghorne when commenting on a mechanistic Newtonian view of the universe in a book from 2011, Science and Religion in Quest of Truth. He wrote, "There was always something strange about this idea, for it is a basic human intuition that we are not mere automata. Not only would such a belief negate the widespread conviction that human beings exercise a significant degree of freedom in choosing how to act, but it would also threaten to subvert belief in human rationality. The richness of human life only begins to make sense if mental experience is more than epiphenomenal froth on the surface of a purely materialist reality. If we were simply machines, human discourse could be no more than automatic mouthing. with no true exchange of rational argument taking place. So how could the widely held view among scientists and philosophers that the universe is deterministic, and even all human actions are inevitably prearranged, preset, be reconciled to our moral intuitions, our justice systems, and our everyday experience? It's a very difficult conundrum to try and work around, but the hard determinists, compatibilists, and libertarian thinkers all have fairly good reasons for believing what they do. Now, the deterministic universe has some opponents. For example, the Heisenberg principle postulates uncertainty at a very low level, a quantum level. And David Bohm's theory on universal alternating layers of causality and chaos says that there are layers in the universe of causality, which means everything is predetermined, and chaos, where things are open. So if the universe seems to have a quality of freedom, now these aren't set in stone yet, these are still scientific theories, but if the universe seems to have a quality of freedom, why can't people as well? So after all this information and vocabulary, you may not be able to remember it all, or even want to, but how we think about the nature of free will is an important concept because of how it affects our everyday lives and our justice systems. But hopefully you'll be encouraged to think a little more on these ideas and just try to keep in mind these distinctions. Among the different perspectives on free will, libertarianism, meaning the power of contrary choice, compatibilism, meaning that free will and determinism are compatible because you always do the thing that you most want to do, and hard determinism, which means that free will is simply an illusion, which seems to fit best with our sense of justice and some of the recent developments of science. I will, of course, leave you to decide the issue by your own free will, or just however you are predetermined to decide.